911 emergency.
We have an emergency. We're at my coworker's house and we found him hidden in his garage. He's on the ground in front of his vehicle. Something is very wrong.
Do you know if he's conscious and breathing?
Oh my God, he's dead.
Albuquerque police officers arrived at the scene within seconds, ready to secure the area and assess the situation.
Where is he? Where is he? Okay.
As soon as we entered the house, I glanced to my right and saw a Christmas tree with a bike underneath it. The realization hit hard. This was meant for someone's child, a child who might never get to ride it. As soon as we turned to our left, we saw the lifeless feet of someone lying on the floor.
I don't know, dude.
It's been a while, huh?
Well, it looks like he cut because this is 31 spot, dude. Yeah, he's down.
A grim reminder of the tragedy we were walking into. His neck was slashed from ear to ear, a sight that threw me for a loop. In that instant, a million thoughts raced through my mind, but one thing became painfully clear. This was undoubtedly a homicide. It was clear we were about to embark on a complex investigation, piecing together the events that led to this horrific scene.
Are we in trouble that
No,
we went
not
in?
at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
No, you did a good thing by going in. You really did.
But we couldn't help him.
I know. We'll figure out what's going on here, okay?
Outside, a woman identified herself as the 911 caller and informed Officer Riley that the victim's name was Don Fluitt.
He's our co-worker. We got a phone call about 1:40 from his little girl.
Okay.
He has a beautiful little
Yeah,
girl.
I know.
She hadn't heard from him all day. So she called me. She had my phone number and I said, "Oh baby," I said, "I'll call your dad."
Yeah.
It hits even harder knowing he had a daughter, a child who now has to face the heartbreaking reality of growing up without her father.
I tried calling him a few times, okay?
Yeah.
We should have come sooner. So I knocked at the door and it just opened. Like it was locked. And then we went in and I opened the garage door and his truck was there and I saw his feet.
Okay.
And
When's the last time you guys talked to him? When's the last time you all talked to him?
he was gone. His sister died, just died.
Oh, okay.
He went to California
Okay.
with his relatives and they were supposed to be back. We thought he was coming back today.
Yeah.
And then the daughter said that they came in last night and
Oh, they came in. Your daughter was with him last night?
I guess, yeah, she
Okay.
drove her house. And
Okay.
I just told the mother what happened. We're
Okay.
all hysterical. He's been through a lot lately.
Yeah.
His sister died of
Okay.
breast cancer
Uh-huh.
just last 2 weeks ago, before Christmas.
Yeah.
He's super stressed.
Okay. Have you known anybody to dislike him?
Within minutes, fire and rescue teams arrived, determining the time of death to be within the past 24 hours. Crime scene technicians began meticulously searching the area for clues that could unravel the mystery. Albuquerque Police Detective Matt Kaplan arrived at the scene, quickly gathering all available information about the victim. He learned that Don was known as a passionate and driven individual, deeply engaged in his life and those around him. Detective Kaplan learned that Don shared a very close, tight-knit bond with his daughter, often spending Sundays together, feeding the homeless. Nothing in Don's life suggested he had provoked anyone's anger or hostility. After surveying the scene, Detective Kaplan quickly ruled out robbery as a motive for Don Fluitt's murder. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, leading Detective Kaplan to consider whether the offender might have been someone Don knew. The scene appeared undisturbed. Everything was in its place, including Don's wallet, further ruling out robbery as a motive. Inside the house, all the TVs were untouched, and Don's cell phone was found in place, making it a key piece of evidence. Detectives prioritized collecting the phone to extract as much data as possible, focusing on recent contacts, messages, or calls that could shed light on any conflicts or arguments he might have had. Additionally, blood evidence was collected, strongly indicating a struggle. Detectives hoped that this altercation left behind enough evidence to eventually identify the offender. Detectives were hopeful that DNA traces left behind on the victim would provide crucial evidence. One of their first requests to the pathologist was to collect fingernail clippings, with the hope of quickly obtaining lab results. However, it could take days or even weeks for those results to come back. In the meantime, Detective Kaplan faced the difficult task of calling Don's mother in California to inform her of her son's murder. In some respects, it makes you emotional, he admitted. You take it personally, and it's an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Hi, Miss Fluitt. This is Detective Kaplan. I'm a police officer with the Albuquerque Police Department.
Yes.
And I'm calling you because we are investigating a case that's involving your son, Don Fluitt.
Yeah?
He was found deceased tonight.
What? You're kidding me.
No, ma'am, and I'm very, very sorry.
My daughter just died 2 weeks ago. You're kidding me. Oh my God. You're kidding me. Oh
No.
my God. This can't be real. I can't lose 2 children in 1 month.
Her heartbreak was palpable, layered with the weight of compounded losses. While the Fluitt family grappled with their grief, detectives broadened their investigation, starting with Don's neighborhood. Detectives spoke with his next-door neighbor, who mentioned having 2 security cameras that could provide valuable footage to piece together the events leading up to the murder. One of the neighbor's security cameras captured a portion of Don Fluitt's driveway, while the other was positioned at her door. This footage quickly became crucial to the investigation, as it provided a clear view of Don's movements, when he was leaving, when he returned, and any potential visitors or vehicles in his driveway. Later that evening, Detective Kaplan met with Don's ex-wife and his 10-year-old daughter to gather details about the hours leading up to the tragic event. Their accounts could hold key insights into Don's activities and any potential threats he might have faced. In the hours leading up to the murder, detectives learned that Don's ex-wife and daughter had already been informed about what had happened. This connection stood out as a lead that couldn't be ignored. Detectives knew time was critical and prioritized speaking with them to uncover any details that might shed light on Don's final moments.
When's the last time you saw Don?
I picked up last night. It was probably at 7:45.
That was yesterday, December 28th?
Yes.
Don and his ex-wife typically exchanged custody at 7 p.m., a routine detail critical to the timeline of the investigation. The custody exchange was delayed to 8 p.m., helping detectives establish a clearer time frame for the investigation. Don's ex-wife had no explanation for who might have done this to him. However, both she and his daughter revealed an ongoing custody dispute that had been a source of tension for some time.
Has he ever mentioned anybody he's had any problems with? Is there anything you can think of at all why someone would want to hurt him?
I really can't think of anything specifically at all.
Adding to the complexity was the involvement of the ex-wife's new husband, Terry, in the situation. There had been early tension between Don and Terry, which immediately signaled to detectives that this would be a complex investigation. After concluding the interview with Don's ex-wife and daughter, it became clear to me that further investigation would be necessary to untangle the complexities of this case. With the ongoing custody dispute and past tension between Don and Terry, he became a key figure in the investigation.
Kind of the reason I wanted to talk to you in private is we want to talk to, like I said, the people surrounding Don. And unfortunately, it puts you kind of in a weird position to not beat around the bush. You're the other guy.
Yes, I am the other guy.
We want to talk to you about that. And the first thing I'm going to ask you, and I'm sure you understand, is kind of lay out what you were doing the past couple days.
Sure.
Let's start with Wednesday. Can you give me what you were doing?
Went to eat, so I went to have myself a hamburger and headed into work.
And then, how long were you in work for?
Well, I went and had my hamburger, and then I ate that stuff, so, I didn't go to work right away. I took a nap in the parking lot. I didn't get back to work until for about 45 minutes, and then I went into work. My shift doesn't start until 11.
Yeah, you started your shift at 11 p.m.?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Don. I know it's been a little bit rocky.
In the beginning, I would say it was rocky. I never even talked to him anymore. I would even try to stay away from that because when we went to court the first time, it was the court thing. Okay, so we had to do back and forth to court. And I just tried to stay out of that.
You ever been to his house?
I've been to his house once.
You've never been inside?
No, I've never seen inside the house.
Initially, Terry appeared calm and cooperative. He was forthcoming about his activities, willingly provided DNA samples, and shared his work and cell phone records. At that point, there was no reason to doubt his account. While waiting for the neighbor's surveillance footage and data from Don's cell phone, detectives continued gathering information from other sources to piece together the events surrounding the case. Detectives also spoke with Terry's boss to establish his alibi, requesting surveillance footage showing Terry clocking in and preparing for his shift. This type of evidence is crucial in confirming or refuting someone's alibi. If confirmed, the individual can be ruled out. If refuted, it becomes a significant lead in the investigation. While police examine the evidence, they remain focused on uncovering the truth. As detectives reviewed the surveillance footage for clues, Don's friends and family came together to say their final goodbyes and mourn the loss of a man who meant so much to them. Don's mother requested an open casket, giving his loved ones a chance to see him one last time. The sight was devastating. They could clearly see the brutal nature of the attack. It was a heartbreaking moment, bringing the painful reality of what he endured into sharper focus. Detectives next focused on Don's phone, recovered at the crime scene, conducting a forensic analysis to uncover any potential leads. They aimed to determine if Don had been arguing with anyone or if someone had visited him that night. During the review, one detail stood out. Don appeared to have a very friendly relationship with someone that warranted further investigation. Detectives identified an individual Don had a friendly relationship with and reached out to her to determine the nature of their connection and whether it could provide any relevant insights into the case.
And the reason you came up is obviously I have Don's phone, and there are several text messages and phone calls between you and Don.
Right.
And just talking with family and some people surrounding Don, it seems that you and Don may have been in a relationship, whether it's friendship or romantic.
Yeah. No,
I don't know, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
no, not romantic, but we were really good friends.
Oh, so how long have you known Don?
Almost 3 years.
And did he ever, during the course of the 3 years, did he ever talk about anything that may have led to what happened? Anybody he had problems with?
There's so many people that I'm just like, that person that, I mean, and it's just, I'm so scared right now because it's right here.
There seemed to be some reluctance on her part to speak with us, which can be challenging as an investigator. When speaking to someone for the first time, it's difficult to determine whether the hesitation stems from fear, guilt, or something else entirely.
The more information we have, the more it gives us to kind of start eliminating people, if that makes sense.
I kind of thought like the landlord. So I'm scared like, oh my gosh, it could have been him. I think that because I guess also he would have access. He has the key.
During our conversation with this individual, we were informed of a potential conflict between Don Fluitt and Benny, his landlord. This tension in their tenant-landlord relationship added another layer to the investigation, prompting detectives to look into Benny's involvement further.
He just seems a little strange. I don't know, just the way since then, he's just seemed different, and he didn't go to the funeral.
Police made a note to follow up on the landlord, but what the woman revealed next was startling. She pointed to Don's own brother, Dennis. This unexpected turn added a shocking new dimension to the investigation. She found it odd that Dennis had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and had become heavily involved in Don's affairs. His unexpected presence raised suspicions and added another layer of complexity to the case. Since Don's death, Dennis had taken an active role in handling the townhome and other property Don left behind. This development led detectives to consider the possibility that a family feud might be at the heart of this crime, adding a new layer of intrigue to the investigation. Nearly a month after Don Fluitt was found murdered in his Albuquerque, New Mexico, home, detectives began focusing on those closest to him. As they continued gathering information, Don's brother Dennis emerged as a person of interest, drawing the investigators' attention. As more information surfaced about Dennis and his sudden reemergence into Don's life after his death, it raised red flags for investigators. This previously non-existent relationship prompted detectives to consider Dennis as a potential person of interest in the case. Detective Kaplan proceeded to question Dennis about his relationship with his brother, seeking clarity on the nature of their connection and any possible motives.
So there's a couple things that I needed to talk to you about.
one, I need some questions about some family history.
Okay.
And two, we're going to end up probably testing some additional items, either in the house, on the house, or around the house.
Okay. I could have done that for you a month ago.
When detectives spoke with Dennis, his frustration was apparent from the start. He expressed strong belief that the investigation had stalled and felt their focus on him was a waste of time, adding tension to the conversation.
Here we are. Unfortunately, I got to work around schedules.
No, and I get that, but you also have to understand how frustrating this is for our family. Like with me, I've had to stay in that house for a month. I had to clean up my brother's own blood, you know, and if anybody's ever done that before, it's not easy. It's not like spilling some oil in the garage and having to try and get it up.
Dennis was called in as a potential suspect, largely because he and Don hadn't spoken in years. However, their mother was quick to defend him. I don't care if they hadn't spoken in 20 years. If one of them needed the other, they would be there, she said, visibly upset. I was furious. How dare they think my other son would hurt his brother? I know they have to look at family, but do they want to interview me too? Am I a suspect now? Maybe I put a hit out on my son. Her anger and disbelief highlighted the emotional toll the investigation was taking on the family. Without revealing too much, detectives explained to Dennis that a thorough investigation requires eliminating everyone involved to ensure no stone is left unturned.
You got to understand, these kinds of cases are very rare. So I'm telling you right now, when you guys see downtime and you guys haven't heard from me, it's not because the case is stagnant. It's not because there's no needs. It's because there is a massive amount of information that has to be combed through. So, that being said, this gentleman here brought him along so I can get the stuff I need from you.
That's fine.
If you feel this is a waste of time, I understand, they assured him, but it's just as important to prove who didn't do it as it is to identify who did. While collecting Dennis's DNA, he mentioned another potential person of interest. Don's landlord, Benny Ruiz, a name that had already surfaced in the investigation.
You know, Don was a little angrier than you think when it came to that giant hole in his ceiling. Don was under the impression that this thing was supposed to be fixed by the time he got back. And when he got to the house, I'm sure he was like, man, how do we know that Benny didn't go over there? And he's like, dude, you're going to fix my wall. Don't worry. I mean, it could have escalated quickly, and then it went bad.
This suggestion added weight to the need to further scrutinize Benny's relationship with Don. Several factors led detectives to prioritize questioning Benny and collecting his physical evidence. Both Don's female friend and his brother Dennis had raised suspicions about Benny, adding to the growing list of concerns. Almost a month after Don's murder, Benny arrived at the police station for questioning.
But like I said, we're now in the process of trying to eliminate people that were there, either in the past or during when this all happened. And I have to get as many prints and DNA swabs as possible.
After Benny provided DNA samples, Detective Kaplan shifted focus, pressing him about Don's townhouse. The line of questioning aimed to uncover any possible disputes or motives tied to Benny's role as Don's landlord.
All right, so Benny, just kind of walk me through, first off, what's going on with the condo now?
We had repaired a leak, and Don called me before he left when his sister died. He said if I wouldn't mind checking it, and I didn't get around to it, so I haven't had a chance to fix it.
Okay.
He was 4 months in the rear of rent. And
That Don was?
Yeah. Don's mother put some money up to pay a couple of months or so.
And so technically he's still 2 months behind.
Yeah, $2,700 I guess exact. It's $2,700.
During their discussion, Benny answered the questions posed to him, but what stood out was his admission that there had been money issues between him and Don, potentially creating some animosity. This raised suspicions of deeper conflict between the landlord and tenant. However, just when detectives were beginning to consider Benny as a serious suspect with a possible motive for murder, Benny turned the tables, offering new information that shifted the focus of the investigation.
I met Don for the first time. Never met him before. Never knew he had a brother, which is kind of weird.
Benny mentioned that Dennis had been wearing some of Don's clothes, which struck detectives as odd and unusual. This detail heightened suspicions, both for Benny and for the investigators. It was a strange thing to hear, especially since Dennis's name had already surfaced in the investigation, raising further questions about his potential involvement in the crime. At this point in the investigation, detectives had two strong persons of interest, Dennis and Benny, both pointing fingers at each other and exhibiting strange behaviors. Benny described Dennis wearing Don's clothes while both men had been involved in a sudden and unusual reemergence of their relationship. With such oddities and inconsistencies, neither could be ruled out as suspects. After collecting physical evidence from both Benny and Dennis, the next step in the investigation was to thoroughly examine all the accumulated evidence. While awaiting DNA results or any further physical evidence, detectives focused on following up on leads that could help move the case forward. The evidence from the scene was being processed, but the search for additional clues led to a breakthrough. After requesting surveillance video from Don's neighbor, it took some time to receive it. Once it arrived, detectives had to sift through a large volume of footage, unsure of when Don was murdered. As they reviewed the video, the neighbor was also going through it on her own. At one point, around 5 or 6 in the evening, the neighbor called Detective Kaplan, excitedly saying, "There's something you need to see on the video." This discovery marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. Police investigating Don Fluitt's murder were focused on two main suspects, Don's landlord, Benny Ruiz, and his brother, Dennis Fluitt. They were hopeful that the surveillance video from Don's next-door neighbor might have captured the killer on camera. As they began reviewing the footage, they carefully cross-referenced the time frame with the night of the homicide, particularly after Don Fluitt and his daughter had returned from California. Detectives knew that Don left for the custody exchange around 8 p.m., and the surveillance footage began to reveal key details. The garage door smoothly lifted, followed by the brake lights of Don's white pickup truck as it pulled out of the driveway and drove away. After the garage door closed, there was a brief moment of silence. Then a figure in a hoodie appeared on the footage, tipping over a trash can that was scheduled to be picked up the next morning and then walking back into the shadows. A few minutes later, Don's truck reappeared on the footage as it pulled back into the driveway. The garage door opens again as Don pulls into the driveway. A few minutes later, he steps out of the truck, walks to the trash can, picks it up, and returns to the garage. As the garage begins to close, the shadows grow shorter, indicating it's closing just before it actually hits the ground. Then the garage door rises again, and a series of flashes appears on the video. Finally, the garage door closes once more, leaving detectives with a critical moment to examine. Based on what they were seeing in the video, Detectives Kaplan and Shu began to suspect they may have captured the murderer on camera. To confirm, they decided to conduct a test. The two detectives returned to Don's home, manipulating the garage doors to see if they could replicate the exact sequence of flashes captured in the footage. This experiment was crucial in determining whether the flashes were consistent with what was seen during the night of the murder. The only way they were able to replicate the same number of flashes from the video was by tripping the garage door sensor as it was coming down. This confirmed that the flashes seen on the footage were caused by the sensor, and it helped detectives understand the sequence of events leading up to the crime. With the new evidence from the surveillance footage, detectives were confident in understanding how the individual got inside Don's townhouse. They had identified the ruse. The person used the act of tipping over the trash can to sneak into the garage after Don had returned. However, without a solid suspect, the case began to stall. Don's family, already grieving, was left wondering if the person responsible for his murder would ever be caught. Police had been painstakingly reviewing the alibis of everyone they had interviewed, and one story wasn't adding up: Terry White's alibi. The surveillance footage from Terry's workplace contradicted the account he had given Detective Kaplan. Terry had claimed that he arrived at work and took a long nap, but the footage painted a different picture, raising further suspicions about his involvement in Don's murder. The surveillance footage clearly contradicted Terry's story. Instead of taking a 30 or 45-minute nap, it showed him parking his truck, getting out, and heading straight into the building. This inconsistency raised significant doubts about his alibi and added a critical piece of evidence to the investigation. Given the discrepancy between Terry's alibi and the surveillance footage, detectives knew they had to confront him again. They brought Terry in for a follow-up interview, determined to get to the bottom of the inconsistencies and uncover the truth.
Again, thank you for coming down.
No worries, I'm sure you're a busy man.
Initially, Terry had told detectives that he went to a fast food restaurant and then drove to a parking lot where he fell asleep. However, during the follow-up interview, his story changed. He now claimed that after visiting the fast food restaurant, he had also gone to a department store to buy clothing, adding new details that raised further questions about his movements and alibi.
I want to stop and get a new sweatshirt for me for work because my wife bought me one for Christmas. I said I'm not going to wear that to work, so I went and bought this one.
Terry's story had shifted significantly from his initial interview. He now claimed that after visiting the fast food restaurant and department store, he went to work, but instead of parking in the lot as he had originally suggested, he went to a dark, unrelated business and fell asleep there. This substantial change in his account raised more suspicions, but it wasn't enough to make an arrest. After collecting a DNA sample from Terry, detectives had no choice but to release him, though he remained under scrutiny. During this time, the DNA lab called with results, and there was a noticeable shift in Detective Kaplan's demeanor. He could hear the excitement in the analyst's voice, sensing that something important had been uncovered. When the analyst revealed that the DNA results were a match, it marked a turning point in the case. Detective Kaplan then immediately contacted Don's mother to share the news.
We do have a suspect in this case, and we do have an arrest warrant. He's not in custody.
Okay. Who is it?
It's Terry White.
Yes! God.
Dennis, I put you through hell. And I'm going to tell you the warrant is based on forensic evidence on scene. We do have an active arrest warrant for him.
After 3 months of intense investigative work, Detective Kaplan finally had the breakthrough he needed. The DNA results confirmed the identity of Don Fluitt's killer, bringing the case closer to closure and ending months of uncertainty for Don's family. Now that Detective Kaplan had the DNA results, he could begin piecing together what really happened that night. The surveillance video played a crucial role in outlining the timeline, showing how Terry had snuck into the garage and used the trash can as part of his ruse. It almost seemed like an ambush, with Terry waiting for Don. When Detective Kaplan compared this new information with the alibi Terry had provided, it became clear that Terry's story was inconsistent, further strengthening the case against him. Terry had initially claimed he went to a fast food place, but in the second interview, he added details about going to a department store to buy clothing. This new information, combined with the surveillance footage and DNA evidence, began to fill in the gaps in the investigation. The inconsistencies in his alibi were now clear, painting a fuller picture of what had transpired the night of Don's murder. Albuquerque police moved to arrest Terry, but by the time they acted, he had disappeared. As investigators, the next best step was to flag the arrest warrant as a national warrant, allowing it to be tracked anywhere in the United States. Just 1 day later, there was a hit on the warrant, bringing them one step closer to capturing Terry. Navajo County Sheriff's deputies located Terry's truck and successfully arrested him, bringing him back into custody to face charges for Don Fluitt's murder. Detective Kaplan was notified of Terry's arrest, and he, along with Detective Shue, headed to Navajo County, Arizona. However, Terry refused to speak with them. Despite his silence, Terry began speaking to someone else, an inmate at the county jail. This inmate claimed to have rock-solid information about what happened the night Don Fluitt was murdered, providing a new lead for the investigation. Detectives made contact with Terry's cellmate, who revealed that Terry had confessed to the murder of Don Fluitt. This admission provided the breakthrough they needed, solidifying their case against Terry.
So he told you he killed someone?
Yeah, he told me straight. He told me blow by blow.
Tell me how he did it.
Terry White snuck in his house, snuck in the garage, but he tripped the garage door and it went up and down a few times. But he ended up getting underneath the guy's
Terry told his cellmate that he knew Don was a smoker, but didn't smoke inside the house because his daughter didn't like it. He implied that Don had come back into the garage, likely to smoke a cigarette, when the ambush took place.
And I was waiting right there by the door. And he said, he got his tire thumped. He's a truck driver, so he got his tire thumped. As soon as he came out, he said, I hit him as hard as I could. He said, I got it. He said, I got that one good shot. And he went out. He said, but to make sure, he said, I went inside the house and I got a steak knife, some type of knife. And he said something about slitting the side of his throat.
This revelation painted a chilling picture of how the murder unfolded, confirming the suspicion that Terry had been waiting for Don in the garage. After a 3-day trial, Terry White was found guilty of murdering Don Fluitt. On August 16, 2018, he was sentenced to life in prison, with an additional 12 years added to his sentence for his crimes. The conviction brought some measure of justice to Don's family and closed the chapter on a long and painful investigation. Don's family can only speculate about why Terry murdered him, as the true motive remains unclear. Don was taking his ex-wife back to court, and in a chilling moment, Terry stood up in court when asked what he wanted, saying, "What I want is Don gone. We want that little girl to be our family." His actions were driven by jealousy. At his sentencing, Terry maintained his innocence and refused to apologize to the Fluitt family, adding further pain to their already unimaginable loss.
I have always said I was innocent, and will continue to say so. No, I will not be apologizing to the Fluitt family for a murder I did not commit.
Don's mother said, "I just sort of smiled and thought, I don't want your apology. I was truly happy he said that, because there's nothing he can give me. He's already taken away part of my life. How do I feel now? I miss him every day of my life, every hour, every minute. I miss my phone calls from him. I miss his funny, silly, crazy little jokes. He was so funny. The hardest word is was, and I always catch myself saying is, but it isn't. It's was. It's a really difficult word. I miss it." After the trial, Terry's wife moved away from Albuquerque with Don's daughter. Since then, Don's family has had little contact with them, further complicating their grief and sense of loss. How do you think Don's family has coped with the loss, given the circumstances surrounding his murder? Do you believe that Terry's refusal to apologize showed any remorse for his actions? If this case left you thinking, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Share your thoughts with us in the comments.